This is the 24 hours of Le Mans, and this is a NASCAR. Moments for the start of the longest, most grueling endurance race in the world. And today we're gonna figure out what Le Mans actually is and how NASCAR got involved. So stick around and watch till the end. Now first, what even is Le Mans? Well, actually, it's a city in northwestern France, for one. More generally though, it's this track here called the Circuit de la Sarthe. It's 24-hour racing, day and night, from 4 p.m. one day to 4 p.m. the next day, without any breaks or stopping points for drivers in between. Therefore, each team can have at most 3 drivers to split those 24 hours across. And while that might seem easy, what makes it really hard is that drivers have to at least be in the car for 6 hours. Winners are determined by class. Whoever completes the most laps within the 24-hour time frame wins. But the overall winner is whoever completes the most laps in the fastest class of all. See, Le Mans has a bunch of different classes of cars competing at once. LMGT3, LMP2, and hypercars. Hypercars by far are the most complicated and fastest class of vehicles. Then there's Garage 56. It's a one-car class reserved for vehicles showing off new technology. And that's where NASCAR was put. And that's what their Camaro was meant to be. They were showing off their next-gen car, replacing the 6th generation before. Despite that though, the FIA was concerned they'd still be too slow, even suggesting they wave a white flag as it went around the track. Plus, as I said, it's incredibly difficult, and no one knows that better than Porsche. See, until 1970, Porsche hadn't won a single race at Le Mans. The year before, they'd entered with their newest design, the 917. They'd hoped they'd win that year, but mechanical issues and a deadly crash severed that hope, with a Ford GT40 winning instead for their 2nd time in a row. And while the race didn't go as planned, they found out something crucial about their car. The handling was really bad. One of its drivers even said the car was horrendous and unbelievably unstable. Now we're going to move on to how Porsche and NASCAR faced a similar issue. But it only happened on sections like this, the Bolzani Strait, leading at 6 kilometers long, where cars can get up to 330 kilometers per hour. This is where the car would randomly wander side to side while traveling at super high speeds, despite the fact the driver kept the wheel completely straight. The simple answer to this question, which they'd learn, was downforce. See, usually with most cars, you don't really need much downforce to stay stable, and that's for 2 reasons. Number 1, most cars aren't going to go 200 miles per hour. And number 2, most cars are decently heavy, which the Porsche 917 wasn't. In 1969, it just weighed around 800 kilograms, while carrying a flat 12-cylinder engine producing 520 horsepower. Without a lot of weight to hold the car's wheels down, the rear tires would literally lift off the ground. So Porsche made a few changes to the tail, adding a flat plate across the area behind the rear wheels of the car. And within only a few practice laps, the car was already running lap times 5 seconds faster than before. And that's because the added downforce pushed the wheels even harder into the ground, adding traction. And this is similar to the same issue NASCAR had. If you compare NASCAR's most popular race, the Daytona 500, next to the Le Mans track, you can see why NASCAR would need to change the design of their aerodynamics. That's exactly why they added super aggressive front splitters and a rear diffuser to the car. Now, these 2 things act together to help produce more downforce for the car. Now, the rear diffusers work due to the Venturi effect, where the faster a liquid travels, the less pressure it exerts. These channels act like little small wind tunnels, concentrating air traveling underneath the car into small spaces where it's forced to accelerate, lowering the pressure that pushes the car up. Front splitters, on the other hand, act to separate the air as it hits the front of the car, separating the much more valuable natural high pressure air over the top of the car, leaving the rest traveling underneath. Now, with the aero under control, Porsche decided they should focus on the rest of the car and get as much power out of it as they were allowed, swapping the engine for its higher displacement brother, the 4.9 liter, which output around 600 horsepower. And here's the thing, while a base NASCAR isn't going to be as fast as an ultralight Porsche, they do have one benefit: modern technology that makes their engines more tunable, meaning no engine swaps to get more power. Now, NASCAR's Cup Series cars are supposed to have around 510 horsepower from a 5.9 liter V8 engine with a restrictor plate over the air intake. And all it does is restrict the amount of air that can get into the engine, reducing the amount of horsepower the engine can produce. But the version at Le Mans is slightly different. As you could have guessed, there's no air restriction on this engine, meaning it pushes a lot higher horsepower numbers. And number 2, they tune the engine's air and fuel mix ratio. Now the engine outputs even more horsepower than it did stock. And number 3, they reduce the max amount of RPMs the engine can reach. Since at Le Mans, they're going to be racing for a lot longer, which means a lot more wear on the engine. Now we're going to move on to testing, but I've basically combined what happened in testing into one bit, so keep watching. First, what happened with Porsche? Well, after Porsche had run enough testing to be confident in their car, during the 1970 24 Hours Le Mans, they placed 2 of their cars in first and second. This is a far cry from NASCAR's Le Mans car, but I think what's important, the 1917 was built for Le Mans from the ground up. Everything from the way the car looked to the way it sounded was focused on purely winning Le Mans. NASCAR's Camaro wasn't though. But despite that, during just the qualifying race, they outpaced all of the other LMGTE cars on the track that day, with the Camaro setting a lap time of around 3 minutes and 53 seconds. This proved to everyone, including the FIA, that they weren't the danger, everyone else was. So as you can see at the start of the race, the Camaro was placed in between all of the other cars, and probably created one of the best images I've ever seen. Now, the start of the race was pretty good for the Camaro. By sunrise, it had passed all of the GTE cars, like before. And while there were still some issues with the car, like cornering, because of the amount of effort it took to drive the Camaro, they were able to overcome those issues. The drivers knew the car was a lot to handle, and they treated it that way, meaning smooth inputs, trail braking, easy throttle control, all to prevent complete oversteer and understeer. But what's really weird about the car sliding around so much is that Goodyear had developed entirely new tires for this car. Tires like the ones normally ran during a NASCAR Cup race would break down too quickly, causing the team to pit more often and losing time for running laps. But then almost out of nowhere, the transmission exploded. All the power the car was making was just too much for it. And what sucks even more is that Le Mans, after your transmission breaks, you're out. It's a killer move for a lot of teams, and this included NASCAR and Hendrick Motorsport. That's because transmissions are vital to all cars. If you ask the FIA, a transmission swap is equivalent to sticking a whole new engine in. But because it was an experimental entry, and it was super popular among fans, they let them swap the transmission. And only 2 hours later, they returned back to the race, somehow almost immediately pushing the car to its limit, setting their fastest lap time of the entire race at just 3 minutes and 50 seconds. Before the end of the race, they'd in total completed 285 laps around Le Mans. That's the entire length of US Route 66 in just one day. They eventually finished 39th overall, which seems kind of bad until you realize it's 39th out of 62. Yes, the GTE cars had more restrictions than the experimental next-gen Camaro, but come on. A NASCAR, a modified NASCAR with a literal gearbox failure and 2 hours of wasted time, beat out 23 of the other cars specifically made, designed, and honed in for years for the perfect balance of performance and power at Le Mans.